I thought Jake was my best friend. Until one day I walked into a bar where he was sitting with my business partners and calmly stating, "I think he can't handle it. We need to remove him from the company." They didn't know I was standing right behind them. The whiskey burned my throat as I downed another glass, trying to process what I'd heard 3 hours earlier. Jake Anderson, my best friend since sophomore year at Stanford, the guy who stood as my best man, the person I'd built my entire business life around, had just tried to orchestrate my removal from my own company. Rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Manhattan apartment. 15 floors below, New York City continued its nightly dance of lights and shadows, oblivious to my world crumbling. I poured another drink and replayed the moment in my head for the 100th time. I hadn't planned to stop by Murphy's that evening. The upscale Boston bar had become our unofficial meeting spot for company celebrations, but I was supposed to be on a flight to Chicago for a client meeting. When the flight got cancelled due to weather, I decided to surprise the team. I knew Jake had mentioned gathering our investors there for drinks. The moment I pushed through the heavy oak doors, I spotted them in the corner booth: Jake, our two primary investors Martin and Sophia, and Richard, our company lawyer. Something in Jake's posture made me pause. Instead of his usual animated self, he was leaning in, speaking with intensity, his voice just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. I approached quietly, planning to surprise them. "Look, Daniel's brilliant at product, we all know that," Jake was saying, swirling his scotch. "But he's way out of his depth as CEO. The company's growing too fast, and he's making amateur mistakes. The Westfield deal almost fell apart because he couldn't handle the negotiation." "That's a serious claim, Jake," Sophia responded, her eyes narrowing. "Daniel founded this company." Jake leaned forward. "And I've been covering for him for years. The investors don't see it because I've been fixing his messes. But if we want to scale beyond the East Coast, we need leadership that can handle it. I think he can't handle it. We need to remove him from the company." I froze mid-step, blood rushing to my ears. The Westfield deal had been Jake's responsibility. He had told me he needed more experience in client negotiations. I'd stepped back specifically because he had asked me to trust him with it. "This is delicate territory legally," Richard said, thumbing through his phone. "His name is on most of the foundational documents." "I've been working on that," Jake replied with a confidence that chilled me. "I've been having him sign updated agreements for months. Amendments that seem routine but actually distribute his controlling interest." Martin nodded slowly. "What's the timeline you're thinking?" "Quarter end. We announce a restructuring, move Daniel to founder and chief innovation officer, I step up as CEO. 6 months later, we ease him out completely." I backed away silently, then walked to the bar and ordered a whiskey. My hands shook as I lifted the glass, but my mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. 10 years of friendship. 5 years building the company together. All of it a calculated lie. I nursed my drink for 20 minutes, sitting where they couldn't see me, watching Jake laugh and pat Richard on the shoulder as if they weren't plotting my professional execution. When they finally left, I stayed behind, ordered another drink, and began to plan. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, before even Melissa, our dedicated office manager who typically beat everyone by an hour. I needed time alone with our servers and filing cabinets. Jake and I had started DevEdge solutions from my garage in Palo Alto. We'd moved to Boston when we secured our first major funding round. What had begun as custom software for small businesses had evolved into an enterprise-grade development platform used by companies across the country. Last year, we'd hit 8 figures in revenue. Next year, we were projected to double that. I spent 2 hours combing through digital files, downloading emails, and photographing paper documents. By the time the office began filling with employees, I had compiled enough evidence to confirm my worst fears. Jake had been systematically positioning himself to take control for at least 18 months. Contracts I thought I'd reviewed had subtle modifications. Investor update emails sent under my name contained promises and projections I'd never approved. But Jake had made critical miscalculations. First, he'd underestimated Melissa's loyalty to me. When I casually asked her over coffee about some paperwork Jake had filed recently, her confusion confirmed he'd been bypassing normal channels. "That's odd," she said, frowning. "He told me you'd already signed off on those changes to the operating agreement. I should have double-checked with you directly." Second, he'd forgotten that our banking was structured from our earliest days. The primary accounts required my personal signature for major changes, a relic from when we were too small to bother updating our banking protocols. Most importantly, he'd never imagined I would discover his betrayal before he was ready to strike. For the next 3 weeks, I maintained a perfect facade. I scheduled lunches with Jake where I shared concerns about our expansion strategy, deliberately presenting myself as overwhelmed. I requested his help on decisions I'd normally make independently, feeding his ego and confirming his assessment that I was struggling. Meanwhile, I was meticulously building my counterattack. I scheduled one-on-one meetings with our key developers, securing their loyalty by sharing my vision for the company's technical future, something Jake had never fully understood or valued. I arranged a confidential meeting with our secondary investors, ones Jake had largely ignored because their stake was smaller. In my home office, away from the company's servers and equipment, I established a new corporate entity. I shifted intellectual property that was still solely in my name into this new structure. All legally, all carefully documented. The most difficult part was watching Jake continue to smile at me, clap me on the shoulder, and ask about my parents as if he wasn't actively betraying me. Each friendly gesture now revealed as calculated performance made my stomach turn. On a rainy Thursday, exactly 1 month after overhearing the conversation at Murphy's, I received a calendar invitation from Jake, strategic planning discussion, Daniel, Jake, Richard, Martin, Sophia. So this was it. My execution date had been scheduled. I accepted immediately, then made 3 phone calls. The meeting was set for Monday morning. I spent the weekend finalizing my preparations and battling waves of grief and anger. This wasn't just business betrayal, this was the loss of someone I had considered family. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable sunshine streaming through the conference room windows. I arrived 15 minutes early and set up my laptop. Jake entered next, his smile faltering slightly when he saw me already there. "Early bird today, huh?" he said, setting down his premium leather portfolio, a gift from me last Christmas. "Big meeting," I replied with a shrug. "Thought I should be prepared." The others filtered in. Richard looked uncomfortable, tugging at his collar. Martin and Sophia were poker-faced, but their eyes darted between Jake and me with undisguised tension. Jake cleared his throat once everyone was seated. "Thank you all for making time. We have some important company structure issues to discuss." "Actually," I interrupted smoothly, "I've prepared a presentation, if you don't mind." Without waiting for permission, I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared, DevEdge Solutions, Restructuring Proposal. Jake's face registered momentary confusion, quickly masked. "Great minds think alike, I guess. Go ahead, Daniel." I clicked to the next slide. It contained a single sentence, financial irregularities and breach of fiduciary duty. The room went silent. Jake's smile vanished. "What is this?" Sophia asked, leaning forward. "Evidence," I replied calmly. I clicked through to the next slides, documentation of Jake's manipulations, email trails showing his deliberate undermining of deals while blaming me, bank records with unexplained transfers. "This is absurd," Jake sputtered, his face reddening. "Daniel's obviously creating some fiction because he's struggling with leadership." "That's interesting," I said, maintaining my composure with effort. "Because I have signed affidavits from 3 clients confirming you told them I was being replaced as CEO. Clients we haven't even told about this meeting." Martin was scrolling through the printed documents I distributed, his expression darkening. "Jake, these transfer authorizations, did you forge these? Of course not. This is a desperate play. Daniel knows he's out of his depth. Jake turned to Richard. As our legal counsel, you should shut this down immediately. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Actually, I received some concerning information over the weekend. The SEC has opened an inquiry based on an anonymous tip about irregular financial reporting at DevEdge. Which they'll find, I added, because someone has been misrepresenting our financials to make our position look weaker than it is. Presumably to drive down our valuation before a restructuring. I stared directly at Jake. This is insane. Jake stood up, hands planted on the table. We've been friends for a decade. I've dedicated my life to this company. You plan to push me out of my own company and take it for yourself, I said, my voice finally betraying emotion. You manipulated documents, lied to our investors, and undermined deals to make me look incompetent. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out another folder. This contains my evidence, which has been filed with the authorities this morning. It also contains termination papers for Jake Taylor, effective immediately. You can't do this, Jake whispered, but his face had gone pale. I already have. The board vote was conducted yesterday. I nodded to Sophia and Martin. The secondary investors were quite concerned when they saw the evidence. And the primary accounts? I continued, watching realization dawn in Jake's eyes. I've transferred all operational funds to new accounts that require dual authorization from me and our new CFO. I gestured to the door as it opened and Linda Chen, our longtime head of finance, walked in. Jake looked frantically from face to face, finding no allies. This is a mistake. All of you are making a terrible mistake. Security will escort you to clear out your desk, I said quietly. Your credentials have already been revoked. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Jake's shoulders sagged as the full weight of his failure crashed down on him. As he was being led out, he turned back. Daniel, we can talk about this. There's an explanation. I met his gaze one last time. Goodbye, Jake. The door closed behind him. The room remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Sophia spoke. Daniel, I want to apologize. We should have come to you when Jake first approached us. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. We have a lot of work to do to stabilize things. Linda will lead a full financial audit. I've prepared statements for our employees and clients. I closed my laptop. If you'll excuse me, I need a moment. I walked to my office and closed the door, sinking into my chair. Victory felt hollow. In saving my company, I'd lost my oldest friend. Even knowing his betrayal, there was grief in the finality of it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. Jake, of course. I set the phone down without responding and turned to look out at the Boston skyline. He was wrong. It was over, at least this chapter. I'd protected what I'd built, but at significant cost. The question now was what kind of leader I would choose to be moving forward. Whether I'd let this betrayal define me or use it to build something stronger. Whether I'd look over my shoulder for the rest of my career, waiting for Jake's retaliation, or focus on the horizon. I didn't have those answers yet. But for the first time in weeks, I had the freedom to search for them on my own terms. And for today, that would have to be enough.